The man who sold the Eiffel Tower, twice. Paris, spring of 1925. The city sparkled with art, jazz, scandal, and just enough chaos for a man like Victor Lustig to slip in unnoticed. On the surface, he was a gentleman, sharply dressed, eyes that never blinked twice, and a voice like velvet dipped in champagne. But underneath that tailored coat, a storm of deception, calculation, and something even more dangerous: belief. Victor Lustig didn't just run scams. He believed the world wanted to be lied to. And in Paris, the world was begging for it. At this time, the Eiffel Tower wasn't the icon it is today. To us, it's a symbol. But to Parisians in 1925, it was rusting metal, left over from an old World's Fair, expensive to maintain, and controversial from day one. The government was quietly debating what to do with it. Demolish it, sell it, something. But they weren't saying it publicly. That conversation was buried behind closed doors, which made it the perfect rumor for Lustig to weaponize. He didn't stumble onto the idea. He hunted it. In a cafe one afternoon, flipping through a newspaper, he caught a tiny article discussing the Eiffel Tower's high maintenance costs. The city was struggling. Post-war recovery was bleeding the treasury dry. And Victor? He smelled opportunity. Real estate scams were old, fake bonds were risky. But selling the most famous building in the world, that had style. Victor got his hands on government letterhead. Not hard for a man who could charm a king and pickpocket a priest in the same breath. Then he printed official-looking invitations to a secret government auction of the Eiffel Tower. Scrap metal dealers across France received their letter. It was discreet, confidential, urgent. The government, they were told, was looking to quietly sell the Eiffel Tower for parts. The upkeep was too much. The public would panic if they knew, but if you came to this private hotel meeting and brought a bid, you might walk away owning the most famous structure in France. And they believed it, because Lustig made them want to believe it. He rented out a suite at the Hôtel de Crillon, one of Paris's most luxurious hotels, pretending to be a deputy director from the Ministry of Posts and Telegraphs. The suit, the wax-sealed folders, the subtle nervous energy like he was doing something above his pay grade. It was all part of the act. These weren't dumb men he invited. They were professionals, steel bosses, industrial minds. But even sharks can be fooled when there's blood in the water. Among the bidders was André Poisson, a businessman who wasn't the biggest fish in the room, but was definitely the most eager. And Lustig noticed it right away. Lustig always chose his marks not by their money, but by their insecurity. Poisson wanted legitimacy. He was trying to break into Paris's elite, make a name for himself, do something that made his rivals jealous. And Lustig played him like a violin. He leaned in, told Poisson he understood, that government dealings like this were always messy. There might be unofficial fees to smooth the process. You scratch my back, I'll make sure the Eiffel Tower lands in your lap. Poisson, already caught in the fantasy, paid the bribe. Then he paid the fee for the tower itself. Lustig handed him forged documents. Poisson thought he owned the Eiffel Tower. And just like that, Lustig vanished, gone, out of Paris. No arrests, no warrant. Why? Because Poisson was too embarrassed to go to the police. How do you admit to the world you bought the Eiffel Tower like a fool? Lustig's greatest weapon wasn't his charm. It was his ability to turn victims into willing accomplices through shame. For weeks, Poisson waited for his title to be verified. But nothing came. No calls, no letters, just silence. Eventually, he understood, and he said nothing. Not a single word to authorities, to business partners, not even to his wife. Lustig knew. Shame is stronger than handcuffs. Now here's where it gets twisted. Most con men would take the money and run. Victor Lustig, he came back to Paris a few months later and tried the same scam again. The exact same play. The letterhead, the secret auction, another hotel suite, another group of greedy scrap dealers. The difference? This time, someone got suspicious. A would-be bidder alerted the authorities, but by the time the police kicked down the hotel door, Lustig was already gone again. Gone, but never forgotten. See, Lustig wasn't just any con artist. He was the man who, earlier in life, had sold a money-printing machine to American sheriffs, a box that spat out real bills, which Lustig had loaded inside beforehand. It printed 2 or 3 legit 20s before slowing down. "It takes 6 hours to print each bill," he'd say. By the time they realized they'd been duped, Lustig was in the next state with their cash in his pocket. This wasn't about greed. It was performance art with real victims. And Lustig's masterpiece? It wasn't the Eiffel Tower sale. Not yet. That was just the opening act, because he would go on to con the most dangerous man in America and walk away smiling. But before we get there, you have to understand what made him so unstoppable. Victor Lustig spoke 5 languages fluently. He could mimic the dialect of an Austrian banker, the cadence of a New York stockbroker, or the slow, syrupy persuasion of a Southern gentleman. He didn't drink, didn't smoke, didn't party. He studied people, obsessionally. He would watch the way a man folded his napkin to guess whether he was nervous or arrogant. He once told a friend, "Give me 10 minutes of a man's silence and I can sell him his own name." He kept a notebook, a handwritten, leather-bound Bible of manipulation. The 10 Commandments for con men. Things like, always look interested, never look bored, wait for the other person to reveal their own weaknesses, never let a sucker get wise, always leave them confused, not angry. He wasn't just running games, he was rewriting the rules of trust. When people think about the Eiffel Tower scam, they wonder, how could someone be so dumb to fall for it? But that's the wrong question. It's not about stupidity, it's about desire. Every victim Lustig picked was someone desperate to win, desperate for money, for respect, for revenge. And desperation is the mother of manipulation. All Victor had to do was show them the mirror and let them lie to themselves. It worked every time. He once conned a wealthy countess by pretending to be a down-on-his-luck aristocrat. She fell in love with the story, not the man. By the time she realized she'd signed over her estate, he was long gone, and she refused to admit it even to her family. She kept up the fiction, claimed he'd died tragically, rather than confess to being conned. Victor Lustig's real genius wasn't theft. It was narrative. He didn't steal money, he hijacked belief. And back in Paris, the Eiffel Tower stood tall, oblivious to its role in the greatest con of the century. Tourists snapped photos. Lovers kissed beneath it. But in one office, perhaps still tucked inside a drawer, sat André Poisson's forged deed, collecting dust, a reminder that even the most permanent structures can be turned into illusions. Victor Lustig's face would soon be plastered across newspapers from Paris to Prague. But in 1925, for a brief moment, he was a ghost in silk, haunting the elite, dancing just out of reach, and whispering one terrible truth: if the world is fake, then the best liar wins. Victor Lustig didn't disappear after Paris. He upgraded. America was his playground now, and in the 1920s, the U.S. was drunk on prohibition, jazz, and illusion. New York skyscrapers rose like middle fingers to the past, while mobsters, bankers, and fake oil tycoons battled for the top floor. And floating through it all like a silk-threaded ghost was the man who'd already sold the Eiffel Tower and vanished twice. Victor Lustig didn't just walk into America. He walked into the lion's mouth, patted its head, and fed it its own wallet. He rebranded himself in the States as Count Lustig, a European noble fallen on hard times with enough accent and elegance to convince the wealthy he was one of them. And if there's one thing rich Americans love, it's imported class. He wore handmade suits, carried a cane that unscrewed into a hidden flask, and told stories about hunting with Habsburg princes, all while scouting his next mark. But his greatest trick in America wasn't a fake auction. It was a machine. Or rather, the illusion of one. The Romanian box, as he called it, looked like something out of a magician's kit. Walnut casing, brass knobs, and a long slot at the top. He told his marks it was a currency duplicator, a device that could chemically reproduce any bill inserted, perfectly legal if used privately. He'd demonstrate by inserting a $100 bill into the machine, then, 6 hours later, pull out a real second $100 bill. The buyers were stunned. What they didn't know? Lustig had already loaded the box with real money beforehand. He'd wait out the fake processing time, keep the conversation warm with stories, wine, and laughs, and when the duplicate emerged, it was a real pre-planted bill. Flawless. Victims paid tens of thousands for the machine. Some tried it themselves, waited hours, only to find the same note they'd inserted still there. By then, Victor was gone, on to the next town. But the moment everything changed, the moment history twisted and gnashed its teeth, was when Victor Lustig decided to scam Al Capone. Yes, that Al Capone, Scarface, King of Chicago, the man who controlled bootlegging, bribed judges, and ordered hits over breakfast. He wasn't just rich, he was feared. People crossed the street when they heard his name, but Lustig didn't flinch. He saw Capone the way he saw everyone, a man with a flaw. And Victor had an idea. Now here's the twist. He didn't scam Capone with a fake machine. He didn't offer him phony stock. He didn't forge documents. No, Lustig played a longer, colder, more psychological game. He asked Capone to invest $50,000 in a business deal. Capone, always looking for a good hustle, agreed, but Lustig didn't touch a dime of it. For 60 days, he let the money sit in a safety deposit box. Then he returned to Capone, face full of regret, and said the deal had collapsed. "I failed you, sir," he whispered. "Here's every cent, untouched." Capone was stunned. No one had ever given back his money. No one had dared admit failure. That's when Lustig struck. He didn't ask for another investment. He asked for a favor, said times were tough. He was broke. "If you could just loan me $5,000 to get back on my feet." Capone, convinced this was the only honest man he'd ever met, handed it over. Victor Lustig walked out of that hotel with $5 grand from the most dangerous man in America, all by conning him into trust. Let that sink in. Now here's where it spirals. The U.S. Secret Service had already heard whispers of Lustig's name. They knew about the money boxes, the fake banknotes, the European Vanishing Act, but he wasn't sloppy. He moved constantly, changed names, burned trails, until finally, one mistake cracked it all open. A jealous girlfriend. Her name was Billie Mae Scheibel. She was beautiful, wild, and used to men falling at her feet, but Lustig played women like he played bankers, with distance. When she discovered he was cheating, she didn't cry, she called the feds. And in 1935, they caught him in New York, briefcase in hand. Inside were engraved plates for $100 bills, inks, papers, all perfectly matched to the U.S. Treasury. Lustig had gone from illusions to manufacturing money itself. He was printing fake bills so perfect they fooled banks. When the agents interrogated him, they were met not with panic, but performance. Lustig smiled, complimented their shoes, offered them tea. He asked about their families. One agent said, "He made you forget why you were arresting him." But the law doesn't forget. And this time, neither did the American government. He was sentenced to 20 years at Alcatraz, the Rock, a prison built for men like him, men too slippery, too smart, too dangerous. And yet, as they dragged him away, Victor Lustig leaned to a guard and whispered, "I'll be out in 3." The guard laughed. But Victor wasn't joking. 2 years into his sentence, he faked illness, got transferred to a hospital in Springfield, Missouri, and escaped through a window. Gone again, America's most wanted ghost. Posters went up. Rewards were offered. Agents were furious, but they should have known better. Victor Lustig didn't obey locks. He rewrote reality. Now here's your cue, folks. If Uncle Luke just sold you this story like Lustig sold the Eiffel Tower, you better pay up in the only currency we take around here. A like, a comment, and hit that subscribe button if you're feeling a little smarter than the U.S. Treasury today. Because if you think this is wild, wait till you hear what Lustig pulled off next. He was caught again 6 weeks later, a routine traffic stop of all things. He was driving under a fake name, wearing a mustache disguise so thin it would have embarrassed a cartoon villain. But even then, the officers hesitated. The man spoke so smoothly, they second-guessed the warrant in their own hands. Only when Lustig slipped, mentioning a detail he shouldn't have known, did they arrest him again. Back to Alcatraz, back to silence. But even behind bars, his legend grew. Fellow prisoners called him the Count. Guards treated him with a strange mix of fear and respect. And when his cell was searched, they found blueprints for an escape that almost worked, including a plan to forge transfer documents from the warden's typewriter. Victor Lustig never admitted guilt. He never showed regret. He once told a journalist, "If the world was honest, I'd be out of a job." But he didn't die in the headlines. He didn't get a movie ending. He died in 1947, alone in prison, of pneumonia, buried under a number, not a name. Yet today, his fingerprints are on every phishing email, every Ponzi scheme, every fake influencer selling magic drops and freedom pills. Because Victor Lustig didn't just con people. He taught the world how to con itself. Victor Lustig died the way most great liars do, behind cold walls, under a number, forgotten by the very world he once spun like a top. But here's the trick no one saw coming. While the man vanished, the con never did. Because Lustig wasn't just a fraud, he was a virus, a walking, breathing contagion of illusion, and by the time he was buried, the entire planet was infected. Let's be clear. The scams didn't stop when Lustig was locked away. They evolved, they multiplied. They got smarter, slicker, more ambitious. And if you look closely, you'll see Victor's fingerprints in places you'd never expect. In every offshore account promising easy returns. In every get-rich-quick whisper echoing through TikTok. In every smiling face telling you the limited-time deal is just for you. It's all just echoes of the man who sold the Eiffel Tower, twice. Because Lustig knew the deepest truth about people. We don't just fall for lies. We need them. We crave the feeling of being in on something special. The idea that we know something others don't. That we've been chosen. That we're smart. That we've beaten the system. Victor didn't con people with documents. He did it with dreams. And the people he targeted? They weren't dumb. They were doctors, lawyers, politicians, police chiefs. They were respected, educated, calculating. But they all shared one weakness. They thought they were too smart to be fooled. That's the real genius of Lustig's playbook. He didn't chase ignorance. He hunted ego. Let's go back one last time to the Eiffel Tower job. You think that was about money? It wasn't. Victor could have made more counterfeiting or sticking up a bank. That con wasn't about profit. It was a message. It was a statement so absurd, so insulting, so brilliant, it burned into history like a brand. I convinced you the Eiffel Tower was for sale. That's like saying the Statue of Liberty's going to auction, or Big Ben's being dismantled for clock parts. It was lunacy, and that's exactly why it worked, because the lie was too big to question. The more unbelievable it got, the more people leaned in. That's the Lustig effect. A truth so twisted it has to be real, right? And here's where it gets even more bizarre. Years after Lustig's death, rumors started to swirl. Whispers that he hadn't really died in Alcatraz. That the body in that cold steel bed wasn't him. That maybe, just maybe, the greatest con man in history had pulled off the ultimate vanishing act, faking his own death to escape prison forever. No proof. No fingerprints, no confession. Just enough breadcrumbs to keep the legend alive. There were reports of a man in South America, fluent in French and German, selling imported machines that printed near-perfect counterfeit pesos. A man who traveled alone, never photographed, and always paid in cash. There was even a Cuban intelligence file on a mystery figure in the 1950s who possessed knowledge of U.S. currency manipulation unmatched by any known expert. Coincidence? Maybe. But if you've learned anything from Uncle Luke by now, it's that coincidences are just con jobs the universe hasn't admitted yet. And the Eiffel Tower? Still standing, still immortal, still unknowingly linked to a crime so outrageous that most textbooks won't touch it. Try finding Lustig in your high school history book. You won't, because his story doesn't fit the mold. He wasn't a war hero, he wasn't a politician, he wasn't even a criminal in the classic sense. He was a mirror, held up to the greed, vanity, and blind spots of a world desperate to believe in magic. You know what happened to André Poisson, the man who bought the Eiffel Tower? His story disappeared. Completely. No official record, no trial, no lawsuit. Some historians believe he moved away, changed his name, started over in the countryside. Others say he died penniless, broken by shame. Either way, he never spoke publicly, not once, not even decades later. That's how powerful Lustig's game was. It didn't just take your money, it silenced you. And don't think the world got any smarter. In 1992, a Nigerian man conned a Brazilian bank out of $242 million using nothing but fake faxes and a made-up oil deal. In 2001, an Italian swindler sold the Vatican a phony Michelangelo. In 2020, an influencer faked a luxury lifestyle so convincingly she got paid $100,000 to wear watches she never owned. Victor Lustig would have been proud, because his con wasn't a scam. It was a religion, one built on belief, and belief is bulletproof. Now here's the last twist. Before his death, or disappearance, Victor Lustig is said to have written a note, smuggled out of prison, maybe handed off to a guard, maybe just a rumor. But the quote lives on in underground circles of magicians, illusionists, and grifters like scripture. When I sold the tower, I didn't sell iron. I sold certainty, the idea that the world works the way it's supposed to. And once I proved that was a lie, I owned them. That's it, right there, the key to his empire of fraud. He didn't break the law. He broke reality. He taught us that even the things we assume are untouchable, monuments, money, trust, are just ideas. And ideas in the right hands are for sale. So the next time someone promises you a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, the next time a stranger says the deal is secret, urgent, limited only to you, remember the Eiffel Tower. Remember Victor Lustig. Remember the man who made Paris question whether its most iconic treasure could disappear overnight. And ask yourself, what are you believing in? Just because you want to, Uncle Luke tells. You just heard the story of the man who conned the world with a smile and walked into history without a fingerprint. You've been warned. You've been amazed. And if you want more twisted truth bombs like this, you know what to do. Drop a comment, throw a like, and if you ain't hit that subscribe button yet, don't let this be the con that fooled you. Because next time, we're not selling the Eiffel Tower. We're digging up the bones buried beneath it.